So today's video is a bit of a whiskey crash course, and by that I mean we're going to learn a little bit backwards. I'm going to tell you about kind of the flavor profiles of the main types of whiskey, and then I'll leave some info links in the down bar that you can go and find out more about where they're from, what kind of base they have, and all of that stuff. But I kind of find that the real world experience of knowing what they taste like first helps a lot more, and that's actually how I learned about different kinds of whiskey. So today I'm going to focus on 5 main kinds of whiskey, and that is Scotch, rye, Tennessee whiskey, bourbon, and Canadian rye. And I'm talking about that because most people would put rye and Canadian rye in the same family, but they're 2 different beasts. So yeah, okay, let's begin with rye because it's closest to me. As you can see, at least this one, the color is quite light. Come on, focus, you know you want to. Alright, the color is quite light to it, and doesn't have much of a nose. Almost none, really. It just doesn't have much depth of flavor to it, and this is because Canadian rye, there's no actual amount of rye that it needs to have to be considered rye. I know some people really love this, and I always kind of associate it with older men who like to have a big kind of plastic bottle of like Canadian Club or something in their house. But it's a part of the market, and I thought I would share a little bit. This is bourbon. The nose is very sweet and smoky, and you can almost tell how rich it is just by smelling it. It is more viscous than the Canadian rye, but to be honest, all of the whiskeys from this point in are going to be more viscous than that is. And it's really able to hold its own in a drink. It pairs really beautifully with all of these big flavors because it is big flavor itself. You can pair it with maple, you can pair it with bacon fat. I've seen that done in drinks before. You can pair it with mint and like mint juleps. You can pair it with, oh god, so many things. Peach, rhubarb, you name it. And bourbon goes well because it's a strong flavor too. So it's a definite marriage, and strong meets strong and they like each other. I don't know where I'm going with this. But yeah, definitely a classic that you should keep around in your bar, and one of my personal favorites. Cleanse your palate. Now, there are some people out there, and especially if you don't drink whiskey very often, you're not going to be able to tell too much of a difference in between Tennessee whiskey, which is like a Jack Daniels, and a bourbon. And the difference with a Jack Daniels from a bourbon is that Jack Daniels is a sour mash, and it's also filtered through charcoal. So this is going to give you less nose than the Maker's Mark bourbon, and it's a much brighter flavor that doesn't have as many smoky qualities as the bourbon did. It's really great. I love pairing sour mashes with orange, which is obviously like the most classic thing that you can do with Jack Daniels, JD and orange. I just find Jack Daniels to be my summertime whiskey of choice because it is so light and it pairs so beautifully with all of these citrus flavors that it lends itself to that kind of easy living drinking. And I know that's not very descriptive, but it's just not as strong as the bourbon is, though it definitely still packs a punch. This is rye. I think rye is the most classic whiskey out there. Now don't hold me to this, and I'm not speaking from a historical background, but when I think of rye, I think of old fashions, I think of Manhattans, I think of all of these really staple drinks that have been around for decades. To be honest, I haven't experimented with rye much myself until recently, but I can definitely see why it's played such a large role in American cocktail history after tasting it. Again, not a huge nose on it. It has a beautiful mellow sweetness to it, and it lends itself to be in drinks like the Manhattan because it does allow itself to be shaped by other flavors. So in the case of the Manhattan, it's being shaped by the sweet vermouth and the bitters, and it makes for a drink that is really quite soft on the palate, and it's not too sharp, and it's a great way to be introduced to whiskey if you're not sure if you like it yet. And it's definitely what I've been reaching for most lately. And finally, Scotch. This is my favorite whiskey, I'm not gonna lie. It's what I reach for at the end of a really long day when you just need to have a quick nightcap on top of an ice ball or sphere, whatever it's called, or just rocks. It's got this great perfumey nose to it. It's smoky, it's sweet, it almost doesn't need anything, and I almost feel like Scotch is ruined when blended in cocktails, and I much prefer to use one of the other whiskeys that I mentioned for cocktails. But this is beautiful on its own. Don't mess up a good thing. There's a reason why men have been drinking this alone for ages, and women as well. For what it's worth, I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you in my next video.